All right, let's dive into the really complex, kind of messy world of colonial America. This isn't just a simple story about growth. It's about these powerful, clashing forces that created this explosive mix of diversity, conflict, and ambition. We're going to see exactly how it all collided.
Okay, I want you to do something for me. Just picture this. You're walking down a busy street in Philadelphia. The year is 1750.
You're hearing German on one street corner and then English on the next. The shops, they're packed with goods from all over the world. Some of it legal, sure, but a whole lot of it smuggled. You see farmers rolling in from the countryside, and maybe you overhear a group of enslaved Africans speaking quietly in a language you don't even recognize. I mean, you can just feel it in the air, right? This isn't that small, fragile colony from the 1600s anymore. It's something bigger, way more complicated, and it's just humming with this new kind of energy. And that scene right there brings us to the big question we're tackling today. How did these three massive forces, we're talking immigration, economic growth, and slavery, how did they combine to completely remake the American colonies? And this isn't just about money, you guys. These forces reshaped everything, society, culture, and what it even meant to be an American. Okay, so first up, let's look at that first major force. This incredible wave of immigration that was totally changing the face of the colonies and raising some really big questions about identity. I mean, we are talking about huge, rapid growth here. Places like Pennsylvania and New York, the so-called restoration colonies, they were just magnets, pulling in massive numbers of new settlers and resources. This wasn't just a slow trickle of people, it was a flood, creating whole new regional economies from the ground up. So the really interesting thing is how people at the time even tried to describe all this new diversity. There was this one writer, J. Hector St. John de Crevecoeur, who came up with the famous idea of the melting pot, where everyone would just blend together into one new American identity. But a lot of historians now are saying, hang on a second, and they prefer a metaphor like the salad bowl, where all these different cultures exist side by side, but don't ever really fully blend. But here's the thing, and this is absolutely critical. Both of those metaphors, they've got some major blind spots. Because no matter which one you use, two massive groups of people were totally intentionally left out of this new mix. Native Americans, who were being violently pushed off their own lands, and enslaved Africans, who were having their very identities systematically stripped away. All right, let's shift gears to our second major force, and you'll see how this all connects. Because while society was changing on the ground, this huge economic system was tightening its grip from all the way across the Atlantic. I'm talking about British mercantilism. So, what on earth is mercantilism? Well, think of it like this. It's an economic system where colonies exist for one reason and one reason only, to make the mother country rich. Britain set up a bunch of laws called the Navigation Acts to basically control all colonial trade and make sure that wealth flowed in one direction, straight back to England. And the whole system was a pretty simple, and for Britain, a very profitable cycle. So, step one, the American colonies export cheap raw materials, think timber, tobacco, sugar, over to Britain. Then, step two, British factories take those materials and turn them into expensive finished goods. And finally, step three, Britain sells those goods right back to the colonies and to other countries for a huge profit. And this wasn't some secret, right? Even back then, people could see what was going on. The famous economist Adam Smith called it out, arguing that the whole system was rigged to help producers and merchants in England, while forcing regular consumers in the colonies to pay way more for everything. You see, for a long time, Britain kind of looked the other way. They had this unofficial policy called salutary neglect. Basically, they didn't really enforce their own trade laws, which let the colonists get used to doing their own thing. But as Britain started to tighten that economic grip and actually enforce the rules, the colonists got really, really resentful. And that feeling started to feed this powerful new desire for independence. And that resentment, it ties into our third force. And honestly, this is the most brutal and tragic part of the story. The dramatic, fateful turn toward a system of chattel slavery based entirely on race. Okay, so the huge turning point here, it all comes down to an event called Bacon's Rebellion in 1676. Now, before this, most of the labor came from indentured servants. But in 1676, something incredible happened. Poor white and black laborers teamed up and rebelled against Virginia's wealthy elite. This absolutely terrified the ruling class. Seeing poor people, black and white, united against them was their worst nightmare. So their solution was as strategic as it was devastating. They decided to deliberately divide the poor along racial lines by phasing out indentured servitude and creating a new system that enslaved people of African descent for life.
And the fallout from this was just swift and brutal. Colonial laws, the slave codes, hardened almost overnight. Slavery was now made hereditary, passed down from mother to child, trapping entire generations in bondage forever. Any basic legal rights that enslaved Africans might have had were systematically destroyed, and a vicious system of racial hierarchy was written directly into the law books.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got these three massive forces churning: massive immigration, boiling resentment over the economy, and the sheer brutality of a new slave society. Let's see how this explosive mix created a society that was just under constant, immense stress. I mean, can you just imagine the pressure cooker this created? You've got new people and new cultures arriving constantly. You've got this growing anger over being economically controlled, and you have the deep, violent tensions of a brand new slave society. All that instability created this feeling of anxiety that was everywhere, and it had to go somewhere. So where does all that stress and anxiety go? Well, it erupts. And one of the most chilling and famous examples is the Salem witch trials. But it turns out they were about so much more than just religion or superstition. You know, historians now look back and see the trials as this perfect storm, a direct reaction to all those social pressures we've been talking about. The community of Salem was facing intense economic competition, its population was changing, and everything felt politically uncertain. The accusations of witchcraft became this horrifying outlet for all the fear, anxiety, and petty local rivalries that were just simmering below the surface. Okay, so after all that, you might be thinking, why does this ancient history even matter today? Well, it's because these competing forces, these deep tensions, they didn't just vanish. They became the contradictory foundation that was carried right into the American Revolution and, honestly, into the present day. If there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. The story of colonial America is not a simple, straight line of progress. It is a story of powerful, competing forces grinding against each other from the very, very beginning. And what came out of that were these fundamental contradictions that got baked into the DNA of America right from the start. This push for inclusion clashing with the reality of exclusion. This ideal of freedom clashing with the brutal practice of coercion. And this amazing promise of opportunity clashing with these deep structures of inequality. These tensions were never resolved back then. And that's what I want to leave you with. These arguments we're still having about who belongs, who is truly free, and who gets a fair shot, these are not new debates. They are echoes from a really complicated and contradictory past. So the real question for us right now is, how do these colonial tensions between inclusion and exclusion continue to shape the world we're all living in today?